Hey, no family, it's Pastor Matt with your devotional thought for today. In Mark 4, we see the following interaction take place. And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" I actually sought this passage out specifically for this Sunday's sermon out of Genesis chapter 1. And I think there's actually some parallels there as we see how God speaks and creation happens. And now Jesus speaks and creation obeys and listens. But the context here is that Jesus had been ministering all day and he was telling the disciples, now let us go across the sea. Let's get in this boat, go across the sea. And Jesus is actually asleep. He's fast asleep down in the boat while this major storm comes and waves are crashing, and the disciples in the boat, really feel like they are going to die. They're going to perish. And so they come to Jesus fearful and panicked, and they find him sleeping because he is just at peace in the midst of it all. Even after a full day of ministry, he's tired, he's exhausted, but he's sleeping through it all without a worry in the world about it. Now, we recognize what happens then in this text as it says, "And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm." So Jesus is awakened by them, and as he awakens, he goes up, rebukes the wind. He rebukes this storm. And the wind ceases. He says, "Peace, be still." And the wind and the waves, they obey him. Nature responds to the command of their creator. And that's what we're going to see in Genesis 1 this coming Sunday as well. But in this particular story, what I love is what happens next. I love that first and foremost. It displays Jesus' great authority over all of creation. But the next thing that happens is just as important. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" See, they were already fearful. They were fearful they were going to lose their lives because of this storm that had come upon them. It was that severe, so severe that they really thought they were perishing together. They couldn't believe Jesus was sleeping because of the fact that this storm was that intense. And he's not fearful of dying. He's not afraid of what might happen to him. Now, the text tells us specifically that they were filled with great fear. At what though? Not at the storm anymore. Now they're filled with fear because of God's power, because of Jesus' raw power, that even the wind obeys him, even the waves obey him, even nature itself obeys Jesus' commands. And we see that later with the fig tree that didn't produce fruit in season, and he commanded it basically to no longer produce fruit, and it was withering by the end of that very day. Creation listens to their creator's voice. And these people now who were afraid of the circumstances now are in utter awe and astonishment. And as our text tells us, we're afraid because of Christ, because of his great power. How is it that this man, who is this man, that even the wind and the waves obey him? How is that possible? How does the wind and the sea obey this guy? And so I think that's an important thing as we look at Scripture, how the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, acknowledging who Jesus actually is, recognizing that creation submits to their creator. And when Jesus gives a command, it happens. And so we, as his followers, ought to be quick to recognize that we too need to trust in him. And when he gives us commands, let us be obedient to that. Let us not seek to usurp our place and say, "No, Jesus, you don't know what's best for me." Or in this case, "I'm going to do what I want to do regardless of what Jesus is calling me to do." Instead, let us seek to be obedient as all of creation will be obedient to God's commands. And we ought to choose now to bend our knees to him, to give him worship, praise, and adoration, just as we see the wind and the waves, the wind and the sea, and all else in creation obey him. Let us not, in our own hubris and our own arrogance, think we can stand against him, because the day is coming where every knee will bow before him, because he alone is the great creator of all things, and it's in him that all things live and move and breathe and have their being. So let us recognize that, and let us seek to bring our lives into conformity with his will, his desires, and his commands.